As we all know, Jesus was crucified by the Jews, but do you know why the Jews hated Jesus so much and wanted to crucify him alive? It was because Jesus had predicted that he was the Son of God and the King of the Jews. But in the hearts of the Jews, their Messiah should be a monarch or a nobleman, a hero who led them to overthrow the rule of the Roman Empire. But Jesus was born in a manger and was born in a carpenter's family. They not only hated Jesus for calling himself the Messiah, but also hated him for being born in a humble family, but preaching the scriptures and using his magical skills to save the world from suffering. The girl was lying on the bed and was almost dying, but Jesus just said one thing to her, and the girl was miraculously resurrected. The blind man who had been blind since childhood found Jesus, and Jesus just stretched out his hands and gently stroked his eyes. Then the blind man miraculously regained his sight. From then on, Jesus became famous and more believers followed him. On this day, Jesus, when the sermon was being preached in the church, suddenly a hunchbacked old man walked in. He asked Jesus to help heal his hunchback. Jesus stretched out his hands and held the old man's cheeks. The next second, the old man's hunchback was miraculously healed. But the Jews next to him were not happy at this time. He accused Jesus of not being able to heal on the Sabbath. Other Jews also raised their hands in agreement. Therefore, Jesus became a thorn in the eyes of the Jews. So in order to eliminate Jesus, the Jewish high priest bribed his disciple Judas with 30 silver coins. On the day before Passover, the 12 disciples had dinner with Jesus. At this time, Jesus also knew that his life was coming to an end. He distributed food to his disciples and then said calmly, "One of you is going to betray me." The 12 disciples had different reactions after hearing this. The disciple Simon Peter stepped forward to ask who the traitor was, but Jesus did not speak. At this time, the traitor Judas came to the Jewish Sanhedrin and told the high priest where Jesus was. Then the Jews led their troops. They took Jesus away. They took Jesus to the synagogue. The high priest began to try him overnight. They claimed that Jesus was everywhere deceiving people and preaching privately. A carpenter's son dared to be called the King of the Jews. Then they convicted him of a false crime. The next day, they took Jesus to the Roman governor's palace to convict him. The governor knew that Jesus was not guilty, but in order to give everyone an explanation, the governor asked the Jews to make a choice, either to release the murderer Barabbas or to release the innocent Jesus. The governor wanted to awaken the conscience of the people in this way, but he didn't expect that the Jewish people outside insisted on releasing the murderer and executing Jesus. There was no other way. The governor could only order Jesus to be flogged, and then threw down the verdict, agreeing to crucify Jesus. Jesus thus began his road of suffering. He carried the heavy cross and walked to the execution ground. The Jews around him were still constantly insulting him and picked up stones and threw them at him crazily. This shows how hateful the Jews are. In the end, Jesus was taken to the highest peak of Jerusalem. The soldiers tore off his clothes and tied Jesus' hands to the cross. Then they fixed his palms with rusty iron nails. Then the soldiers worked together to raise the cross and nailed a sign of the King of the Jews on Jesus' head. The Jewish people below saw this and celebrated in their positions. After 3 hours of exposure to the sun, the soldiers used grape juice to prolong the life of Jesus, who was about to die of thirst. Then they drew lots to decide who would carry out the final blow. The winning soldier raised the spear of destiny and stabbed the unconscious Jesus. After Jesus died, the Father left a clear tear and hit the ground heavily. In an instant, the earth shook and the sky collapsed. The Jewish church was instantly split in two. At this time, the Jews finally realized what they had done wrong. But it was too late. Finally, God sent the terminator of the Jews, Adolf Hitler. We must crush this moment. We must wipe display from our nations will soon be forgotten. What we do will live on for 8,000 years.